Affairs really took me away from my neighborhood and put me in literally every part of the world. I hope that these students are able to take on the things I say and the things that they've learned so far in World Affairs Council and use it as stepping stones through their advancement through life.
It's just opened my eyes and made me a global citizen to try to be able to help people around the world that really need it.
This has really changed me in becoming who I am now.
It showed me what the future in general will be and how people want to help.
Now I'm more interested in international relations and foreign language, specifically Russian.
I've gotten to meet many leaders and many influential individuals who have really impacted my life.
Through the years, we've met Ben Bernanke, we've met Leon Panetta.
A few summers ago, I was able to study abroad in Moldova.
I was able to actually work with Isla Urbana. It's a nonprofit, and they create rainwater harvesting systems in Mexico City and rural areas.
I think everyone's heart is pure at some point.
I believe in human rights, and I think that everybody deserves the chance to do what they think is best for them.
Global young leaders, and it's the eagle is our school's mascot, and it's opening the globe. It's opening our eyes, it's expanding our visions to be less myopic.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Liz Brailsford, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth. Tonight, we gather virtually to celebrate a truly remarkable educator. I'd like to extend a hearty congratulations to the 2021 International Educator of the Year, Viera-Williams. I look forward to our conversation later to discuss her passion for her students. I'd also like to thank General Jim Mattis for dedicating his time to be with us this evening. We have many teachers, administrators, and students from across the region in our audience, and I know your remarks will inspire the future generations of leaders with us today. The Council's Global Young Leaders Program is the only education initiative in North Texas focused on global competence, with Junior World Affairs Council clubs on more than 60 local high school campuses. Students are transformed from observers to informed international citizens by participating in international educational programs focused on diplomatic leadership, civic engagement, problem solving, and cultural intelligence. The Global Young Leaders Program directly impacts, on average, 7,000 students and 1,000 teachers annually across the region. To meet the needs of schools during the time of COVID, we have kept our high-quality programming and expanded events to include monthly discussions for social interaction with globally minded peers. Other events include international career days, academic competitions, service projects, teacher trainings, and leadership workshops. This important work is made possible with your support. The sponsors of tonight's program help the Council provide students with the tools and skills to make a positive change in the North Texas community, effectively interact with people from different backgrounds, and compete for jobs in the global workforce. Even though we're not together to thank our sponsors with a big round of applause, please join me in celebrating the presenting sponsors of today's program, Pepsico and Greenberg Traurig. Many members of our board of directors and other dedicated members of the council have helped make this program possible. Our earnest thanks for each of these generous patrons listed here on your screens. I wish I could mention each of you by name, as each contribution goes so far toward furthering our mission of engaging rather. If you are new to World Affairs Council events, I'd like to invite you to become a member. In the next few weeks, the Council will present a variety of virtual events ranging from a discussion on the legacy of the Arab Spring with CFR Steve Cook, an appearance by former Speaker of the House John Boehner, and a conversation with the Brookings Institution's Fiona Hill on dealing with Russia. To learn more about membership and other upcoming programs, visit our website at dfwworld.org. And now I'd like to welcome Rebecca Acuna, Director of Government Affairs at Pepsico, Prior to joining PepsiCo, she was the executive director of the Latino Center for Leadership Development and has served in leadership roles on political campaigns and in federal and state government in DC and Texas. Thank you again to all of your support, truly. And thank you to all of our attendees for coming this evening. And Rebecca, take it away. Thank you again.
Hey, thank you for that kind introduction, Liz. It is my pleasure to get to introduce my dear friend and fellow co-founder of the Latino Center for Leadership Development. Jorge Baldor has served as chairman of the World Affairs Council for the past few years, but his advocacy on behalf of others started when he was just a boy. See, as a student, he first organized a fundraiser for a family who was affected by a fire. And decades later, his work for others has never stopped, serving as one of our biggest advocates for educations and social causes here locally, but also across the world. In 2017, he founded After 8 to Educate, an initiative focused on homeless youth, and he converted a former school to a drop-in shelter for students in need. He has also started Mercado 369 in Oak Cliff, a vibrant community art center reflecting the culture and history of Latin America. But these are only some of the initiatives that we know about. A leader in business and advocacy, he has received too many recognitions and awards to name. Yet he has always made it clear to me that he does not invest in projects. No, Jorge Baldor invests in people. And I know that because he has invested in me. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and my partner in crime, Jorge Baldor. Jorge, take it away.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate the kind words, and it's good to see you. Certainly thanks to PepsiCo for its support of the World Affairs Council, its continued support, and I'm really delighted today to be able to present our 2021 International Educator of the Year award winner to Maria Viera-Williams. Maria is an English and ESL teacher at Lake Highlands High School in Richardson, ISD, and she's the founder and senior co-sponsor of their school's Junior World Affairs Council, and that has been very active since 2014. The Lake Highlands Junior World Affairs Council has been the most active chapter in 2019 and 2020. She's intensely committed to providing students with informative programs that raise awareness on current, past, and future world issues, as well as exposure to presenters and international expertise. Lake Highlands High School Principal Carrie Jones said, Ms. Viera-Williams is a master of all ingredients of successful teaching and leadership. Her colleagues and students agree. So let's hear from some of them now.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Boden. I'm the Director of Education at the World Affairs Council, and I just want to say congratulations to Maria. She is one of our most involved teachers. Her club at the school is the most involved club that we have out of over 60 JWACs on high school campuses around the Metroplex.
She is so ambitious. She is constantly looking for new opportunities and new ideas to help engage students. So I appreciate so much the work that she does, the connections that she makes to bring these opportunities to our students.
I've been in JWAC for about 3 years, and in those 3 years, I've had Ms. Viera-Williams as my sponsor, and she's a very great, very sweet sponsor. And above all, she's very welcoming, and she makes everyone, no matter where you're from in JWAC, feel welcome. So I'm very thankful and proud to have her as my sponsor.
Mrs. Viera-Williams is so kind and loving and just, you know, a delight to be around, and a wonderful teacher, and really has a passion for what she does and has such a positive attitude every day, comes in, accomplishes so much, and I'm really, really happy for her. Congratulations on your award, Ms. Viera-Williams.
Hi Maria, congratulations on your selection. to the International Educator of the Year by the World Affairs Council. You've always been a great international educator for many, many years. And from your husband to you, I wish you congratulations, continued success.
Well, thank you, George. I really appreciate all that you said about me. So excited about being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, George, thank you for that. And Maria, I love that tribute video. This is apparent how well-deserved this is. So thank you again, congratulations. And just a few questions. I think we'd all love to hear about your work. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to teach and what particularly made you add a global component to your classroom.
Well, first of all, I'd like to take just a minute to thank everyone who made this moment possible. I want to specifically thank Jennifer Boden and Carolyn Fangam, who has been very supportive of me during the World Affairs Council, and my principal, Ms. Jones, all the principals on campus and fellow teachers, ESL, and staff, and especially my co-sponsor of the organization, Mrs. Emily Ramirez. I chose the education field because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of children. I wanted to empower them to feel that they can make a difference in the world, in addition to the academics. They need to realize that they matter. And when you add a global component, what that does is that it lets them connect with the world. As the English as a second language teacher, I've already been connected to them because I've taught for over 25 years English language learners. My experiences at Lake Collins High School, where I'm teaching now at Richardson ISD, my campus has over 2,800 students and over 500 of them are English language learners. We have over 70 languages on my campus. And so it makes it very easy to have international students and add that component. Plus I can hear about their lives and they share with me why they've come here.
That's lovely. So you are literally opening doors for all of these students. I think that's really wonderful. So how do you accomplish this? How do you tap into the world for your students? And what are your future plans, do you think?
Well, as a co-sponsor of the General Affairs Council chapter, what we do is that we provide programs for them, that we have presentations. We invite not only the campus students, but we also invite, it's open to any of the other teachers and their students. We invite the community. We've had various departments come to see us. People from the center office have come to visit and attend our presentations. Our JBAC chapter's global program is called the Global Awareness Speaker Series. And what we do is that we host numerous speakers. We average about 2 a month, sometimes 3 a month, that come and speak to our students. And we've got also programs that we utilize from the World Affairs Council as well as the Global Young Leaders. I also have made speaking arrangements through university professors, leaders of international organizations, NGOs, former students that have come and spoken to us. I've had military come and speak to us, government individuals, anyone who wishes to share their knowledge with the young people on our campus. They talk about their experiences in world health, world affairs, conflict, diplomacy, and they exemplify leadership. And hopefully our students have seen how they can follow in their footsteps. Future plans are to continue doing what we've been doing, providing a variety of programs and global citizenship, world affairs, politics, service projects, whatever we can do to have them be included as part of the planet.
You are truly opening doors. That work is incredible, and it sounds like it's a team effort. And on that note, if anyone's attending this evening and wants more information on how you too can start a program, please do get in touch with us, because more participation is critical to our students and also our future here in North Texas. And on that note, Maria, and we'll end on this, why do you think this is so important, this global educational piece? Why is it so important locally here in Texas and in today's world?
Well, as we all know, the world is becoming ever increasingly globalized. We turn to the left and the right in front of us. We know that we're in a multicultural, and multiple society in which the students and we as individuals will look around and see that we are not individuals anymore, that we are part of a global community. When students see themselves as global leaders, they understand that their actions and inaction make an impact, not only locally, but also globally. They become aware that they need to be socially responsible, to protect the environment, to speak up for the disenfranchised, the persecuted, and to have a role in reducing the global misery. In our society, we need the students to be able to have a global mindset, realize that there are cultural differences. I want them to be multilingual, socially adaptable, and be able to handle any complex problem. We as, I look at our roles as JWAC educators to create an enlightened environment so that it raises not only the global awareness of our students, but also that they understand that they can be inspired to become global change agents, inspire them to become global leaders, because the enlightened leaders that we have today are going to make the world a more peaceful, a more just, and collaborative planet.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that we're a global community, and it sounds like you're already getting them started on tackling the world's grand challenges, which are grand indeed and needs bright young students like you have, and like in our other JWAC groups as well. So thank you again. Congratulations. And your dedication to your students is an inspiration to all of us. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for the award and being recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it is my honor to introduce someone I have greatly enjoyed getting to know in my time with the council in the first few months. The council's new chairman of the board, Dave Meyer. In addition to his council activities, Dave is a partner in the Dallas office of Grant Thornton. He has extensive experience with corporate and partnership tax matters, accounting methods, and mergers and acquisitions. Prior to joining Grant Thornton, Dave was the PricewaterhouseCoopers and was with PricewaterhouseCoopers and Arthur Andersen, serving public and private clients. You can see why he was the council's treasurer on our board prior to being nominated and appointed as our new chairman. Dave is also a cyclist, and I look forward to biking with him and Jim Falk sometime soon. Dave, thank you for your years of dedication to the council, and truly it's been really wonderful getting to know you in these last few months. I've really enjoyed it, so thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. I am really proud to represent the council as chair and look forward to the many wonderful things that we will accomplish in these next 2 years. And now it is my privilege and honor to introduce both our guest speaker and our moderator. In 2009, we hosted the 26th Secretary of Defense and retired General Jim Mattis for his new book, Call Sign Chaos. In his conversation then, he discussed the importance of educating our children. And so we knew if he was willing that he would be the perfect keynote speaker for our event this evening. We're grateful to you, General Mattis, for agreeing to be part of this program. When it comes to introducing someone such as General Mattis, I know I don't need to read a lengthy list of accomplishments throughout his 44-year career as an infantry Marine, but I will anyway. General Mattis is a retired U.S. Marine Corps 4-star general who served as Secretary of Defense from January 2017 to January 2019. During his 4 decades in the Marine Corps, he commanded forces in the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, and Iraq wars. From 2007 to 2010, he commanded the U.S. Joint Forces Command and concurrently served as NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Transformation. He was commander of U.S. Central Command from 2010 to 2013 until he retired from the military. I know you must hear this all the time, sir, but thank you very much for your service to our nation. We are a much safer country thanks to people like you. Moderating tonight's conversation is a good friend of mine, having worked with him for many years at the council, President Emeritus Jim Falk. Jim recently retired from the council after serving more than 20 years as our president and CEO. Jim, we thank you again for your leadership and we look forward to tonight's conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And thanks to everybody who's been supporting tonight's program. Maria, congratulations. And General Mattis, great to see you again. I remember so well when you were here and signing the book. And before we start, I just want to thank you again and recall about how I think you were supposed to leave Dallas Baptist University about 8:30 and you left about 10:30 because you made sure that you signed every book and talked to everyone. And I think that just shows the type of man you are and why you had such a remarkable career. So thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks all of you there at the World Affairs Council. I don't often get invited back to polite company after some of my public statements. So trust Texas to come through and just thank Greenberg Kraurig and Pepsi and all of you for putting this together. Jim, I'm really humbled to add my respects to Maria, you know, for her devotion and passion to the next generation. She's a role model of a leader, and I'm humbled to be here on this occasion. But I get thanked for my service. Just remember, it's mostly the privates and sergeants who earned me my reputation.
Well, absolutely. And you know, it was a pure coincidence, and I hope it really was, that Maria was selected after you were asked and kindly accepted our invitation. But it really is just wonderful that you've known her for years, and certainly, as you affectionately call that junior officer, General Jim Williams. So it's all worked out well. You know, because it is the Educator of the Year event, let's start by asking you to tell us about how education affected you, and can you identify one or two people either in your academic background or in the military that really served as mentors?
Sure, Jim. And I mean, really, it all starts at home, right? I mean, my mom and dad had books, encouraged me to read. So that was big. But I also grew up in a dusty little town on the banks of the Columbia. And it's a town that was built, frankly, to support the Manhattan Project in World War II. So there was the sense of history in the town. We also are with the furthest upstream on the Columbia, where Lewis and Clark expedition made a camp. And we have a lot of Native Americans who live in the area, the Acuna Nation, Umatillas, this sort of thing. And so I think I was well tuned for when Mrs. Edwards, one of my junior high school teachers, put a history book in our hands that really brought home the unifying aspects of the American dream, with all of its good, all of its bad, all of its honesty, but all of its promise, most of all of its promise. And then, of course, I got into the Marines, and wouldn't you know it, all Marines have to read 6 books when you join. And it's not Burger King. You don't get to do it your way. You really got to read them. And then every time you get promoted, you get a new reading list. And most of that is history. So it was just constant education from the time I grew up in this dusty little town all the way through. Even when you make general, they hand you another stack of 20 books and say, start reading, start over again.
What are some of the books that are on the list?
The ones in the Marine Corps are books that have to do with what you can learn from history. General Wavell's Defeat into Victory, for example, Field Marshal Slim, as he's known. Defeat into Victory is one. General Grant's memoirs, his personal memoirs. But also there are books that go into the human element, that talk about the human beings, the human factors of war, and a reminder as you read through that every battlefield in this world is also a humanitarian field. And you start picking up, there's a timeless wisdom, the timeless wisdom that you can draw on. Because life is just too short to think you're going to learn it all by experience. It's just too short, especially if you're going to be a leader.
General, you and I are not going to talk politics tonight, but I think we both agree that January 6th was a tough pill to swallow and to watch. And you often speak about the American experiment. What does it mean to you, and why does it still need to be nurtured?
Well, we can't take the American experiment for granted, Jim. We can't say, well, we were born here, so obviously it's always been a democracy. It will always be a democracy, and we'll be free. I'm reminded of the greatest generation coming home from World War II. Excuse me. And Maria just mentioned, she said, you know, it's a globalized world. It's globalized not out of a policy. It's not a policy, it's a reality. And the greatest generation comes home having sadly learned that after how many tens of millions were dead? We don't even know, 50, 60, 70 million dead. And they said, like it or not, we're part of this. And we're going to have to look at our country now the same way, that like it or not, we're part of it. And we're going to have to roll up our sleeves if we don't want more sad days like we had on January 6th. Roll up our sleeves, learn to compromise. Remember, we set this government up so it cannot function unless there is compromise. The founding fathers did that on purpose. So what it does, it reignites in me the need to really make sure that people like Maria are getting support, that we're teaching the next generation the civics lessons, the history lessons, and finding common ground. I go around now, Jim, and I listen to history classes and everything from middle schools through high schools, through undergrads. I engage with grad students in international relations. I'm not sure the way American history is taught today, Jim, that I would have much affection for our country. I think we have to get back. I don't mind teaching the good and the bad, but we have to have the unifying themes too, and just how many people of all backgrounds have worked hard to build this country.
But you're not the first to say what you've just said in those last 30 seconds, but how do we get there? I mean, where's the obstacle?
Well, I think part of the obstacle is, Jim, that under the amplification of social media, of 24-hour news broadcasts, that we stay stuck in election politics. It used to be, you went through an election, your guy won or lost, and then you all got to work and you fought it out, but you governed the country. Remember, elections necessarily take division. I say, I'm smart. I say, Jim Falk, he's dumb. Vote for me. Okay, it's not always real nice. Welcome to democracy. But when it's over and done with, we used to bury the hatchet. For example, conservative Senator Vandenberg of Michigan, 1949, is asked, how can you work with that left-wing President Truman on this stuff for the Marshall Plan and for NATO? And he said, stop right there. He said, politics stops at the water's edge. We all work together. Now that was a conservative Republican and a left of center president, and they could work together. We're going to have to get out of this constant election cycle where we never stop and start recognizing when the election's over, that governor or that president, whoever it is everybody's governor or president. And if we decide we're going to embrace our hatreds and challenge other people's patriotism because we've got disagreements with them on some policy issues, our enemies are going to be clapping as they watch America destroy itself. The one thing that worried Abraham Lincoln, who guided us through a war where we actually killed each other, was that we would not survive if we didn't come back together. Our country would not survive. We'd better remember that. We owe that survival to the next generation.
So when Dave Meyer kindly introduced me, he said I'd been with the council for over 20 years. I think over time that's going to become much longer. It was just short of 20 years, but over this almost 20 years, I've heard so many of our guest speakers talk about their desire to see not another draft, but some type of service obligation. Where do you stand on that?
You know, it's an interesting question, Jim, because I was talking to some Canadian officers years ago when I was on active duty, and they explained to me one of the few places where French-speaking boys and English-speaking boys actually got to know each other was in the French Armed Forces. And I started thinking about what it does to bring people together in the armed forces. Now, we don't need, and we probably cannot use a military so large that a draft into the armed forces would be fair. So I went and talked to Latter-day Saints, Mormons, about how did they get it so that their young men, and now their young women, as a matter of course, as a matter of expectation, go off on 2 years of mission. when they're very, very young before they started families. How did the Native American tribes keep their languages alive and their traditions alive? And it's interesting that the power of expectation is very, very powerful if adults set the example. If adults can bury hatchets and stop using scorching rhetoric to identify anyone else who's out there that doesn't agree with them. So I think what we need to do is look at where national service becomes an expectation, where a year abroad, as the British used to call it for their students back 80 years ago. Instead, it would be a year where somewhere between the time you're 18 and you're 25, every boy and girl in America does something for their community, for the military, for the Peace Corps, does something for volunteers in service to America, helps Maria as a student teacher assistant. Our teachers can always use that kind of help. But we better go back to saying we're going to look out for our sisters and brothers, and it's just not about how many toys can you have accumulated by the time you're 45. Because if that's all the more you're interested in doing, well, just get ready to pay a shrink a whole lot of money, because you're going to wonder what you did with your life if you're not helping one another.
I'm holding in my hand the summary of the National Defense Strategy of the United States of America, which has you as its author. It was written in 2018. And since we have so many students on the call in our audience, just summarize very quickly what this document is, and then I have some specific questions about what you wrote.
Yeah, first, let me just say to all the young people there, no matter what you've seen as examples right now, no matter what you see on the television station that someone seems to play a lot in your house or in your group, if a president of the United States, Republican or Democrat, male or female, asks you to serve, then it's not just a duty, it's a responsibility. It's also a privilege to serve. So when I was asked to go into this, I've never taken part in political campaigns. I don't think retired generals should do anything publicly, frankly. But remember, you shift from elections to governing. If you're asked to serve, you owe it to the country. You owe it to your fellow citizens to go in and give it your best shot. I got in and I found we did not have a national defense strategy. Now, I guarantee you that your school district has a strategy to absorb additional students who are coming into the area or to expand certain programs. Every corporation, Pepsi, that is run, that one of our sponsors, I guarantee you they have a corporate strategy. So I was disappointed and went to work. I wrote the strategy. I took it to every Republican and Democrat on Capitol Hill that was wanted to sit down and talk with me. I took it to our allies from the Pacific to Europe, to NATO, and I laid it out for them, and then I got their inputs where I could. And what I was doing was putting together a strategy using the George Washington model of leadership. Listen, learn, help, and then lead with the strategy. I listened to other people. I was willing to be persuaded if they had good ideas. I learned their perspectives, which oftentimes broadened my own. I then helped them to understand how I could put that in, or I couldn't put it in, and why not. And then I wrote the strategy. It has 3 lines of effort, because when you're running the biggest corporation in the world, my fine young folks, you can't get down into 1,000 different things that you're going to try to micromanage. I wanted the military to be more lethal. I wanted us to broaden the number of allies we have in the world and deepen the trust with all of them. And I wanted to reform the business practices so I could look your mothers and fathers in the eye and say, I'm not wasting your money. And that basically guided our strategy going forward.
And in the document, you wrote, and I quote, "Our competitive military advantage has been eroding. What is the state of America's preparedness today?"
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of current readiness, certainly thanks to the Congress's budgets over the last 4 years, we are more ready with our current forces. Unfortunately, the previous 10 years had seen very haphazard funding without a strategy. Remember, we did not have a strategy for 10 years. So this is not a slam on any one political party. That's more than one party had been in office before I got there. And so what I had to do is put together a strategy that would earn the trust of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And remember that trust is the coin of the realm in any position of leadership. Trust, you have to gain it. So once we got that money, we were able to take the forces we had and get them more ready. They are ready to fight today, no doubt about it. The problem was for 10 years, the haphazard funding meant we had very, I would call them immature programs, immature in the sense of continuity, to look to the future readiness. And there we've got a challenge. And there we're going to need the help of the Congress as we adapt to this changing world. The current forces are ready. The future forces, you have to look when you're a leader, not to the person who replaces you, look to the person who replaces the person who comes after you, the person after next, in other words. You have to look that far down the road because you owe that to them when you're in these positions. There, we're not doing enough.
General, I think that's startling that you say that for over 10 years, we did not have a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I know you don't like to point fingers, but someone has to be accountable for that. Is that an executive branch error, or is that the military, Congress?
Well, you could line up a lot of people who contributed. Here's the challenge with answering your question, Jim. After our nasty argument with King George III, we intentionally set up a government that required everyone to work together, that they would compete for authority, for power. The executive, the president, would have to compete with the Congress, and the Supreme Court would review what they were both doing and make certain it stayed within the Constitution. And by the way, just to really make it difficult, we made it a bicameral legislature, which meant you had both the House of Representatives and senators, and all of them have to agree. Due to poor definition of what the problems were facing us over those previous 10 years, we passed something that basically said we can force reductions. And it was under a thing called sequester. It was the budget agreement, and it was made so bad that we believed that the Congress would never allow it to happen. In other words, it was so dumb that it would force the Congress to make decisions on the budget. Unfortunately, when you take good people, and most of the people in Washington are very good people, and bad processes win 9 out of 10. This is why you have to study and work and modify processes all the time, even though at times it's the most boring and maddening thing in the world. But the processes were set up basically, Jim, to fail. We just didn't believe we'd be so dumb to take that road. And unfortunately, because we couldn't get together and compromise, remember that word that the founding fathers forced us to operate by, compromise, we ended up in that position.
Well, let's bring in a question from Tarek Rajev. And he asks, why do we need to spend more money on the military than the next top 6 countries combined? Is that what we call hard diplomacy? And I'd add to that, are we seeing an over-militarization, at least in the past few administrations, over diplomacy?
Yeah, first, let me answer the second question first. I go to Washington, D.C. to go in front of the Senate to be the Secretary of Defense, a job I never asked for, never sought out. And I hear that a Texan just came into town for the same reason. He's going to be the Secretary of State, a man by the name of Rex Tillerson. So I called around to a couple of hotels and I found where Rex was. And I said, I'm batching it here in town. How about if we go have dinner together? December 28th, we sit down together. Nobody in the restaurant but us and about 10 waiters, because there's nobody else there. And we're just talking about things. And one of the discussion points I brought up as we got to know each other was, I said, I think we've militarized, over-militarized our foreign policy. I want to tell you what the military can do, what it can't do. I'll give you the military factors, but let's you and I meet every week, and you're in the driver's seat on foreign policy. And we'll walk into the White House always linked at the hip. The White House will never have to sort anything out between me and the State Department. And he just reached over in that Texas way and shook my hand. And at that point, knowing he's from Texas, I knew I could take it to the bank. And that's the way we did it. So I think we've militarized foreign policy. It goes back to a failure of education. It goes back to the fall of the Berlin Wall, really, where people had short-term policies that were not integrated, I think, into a longer-term strategy. Part of the reason is our universities, by and large, do not teach enough military history and diplomatic history. So we now rely on either regime change or economic sanctions. So there's where that's how we ended up in that position where we'd over-militarized our foreign policy and what we did to try to get out of it. And that would take a long time to explain the specific things we did. But going to the money piece of it, the issue really comes down to America's role in the world. Now, reality is a very bad opponent. Generally, you don't want to fight reality. The democracies right now are under pressure by authoritarian states. That's a reality. Whether it be Putin or President Xi in China, Kim in North Korea, the clerics there in Tehran, they think the democracies are on the back foot, that they have a better idea. You shouldn't have to have governments of the people, by the people, for the people. I'd like to tell you that we don't need those budgets. I'd like to tell you that that we can defend this country, this experiment you and I call America, without it. But the fact is, the other democracies are coming on. The contributions to defense across the European democracies are going up. The reality is we face these threats. So do we need that money? I think we can always save some money. That's why I had one third of my lines of effort were exactly that, to try to see where we could save money. But also by working more with our allies, as Maria brought up, in a globalized world, you start reducing the demand on our people. In other words, stick with your allies, and maybe we can find a way to save money. But America can afford survival too. And right now we are in a difficult spot. And if you watch what happened, for example, after 9/11 and all those countries that came to our aid, 3 of those countries, by the way, have lost more boys per capita in the fighting in Afghanistan after we were attacked than we've lost. 3 of those countries have lost more. So believe me, allies are also carrying a lot of the load here. I could go on at some length there, but don't think it's only on America to do this. It's not the case.
We only have about 15 more minutes and a lot to cover, and I want to be sure that we get some questions in. We have a few, but before I read a question, I want you to know that this came from Sergeant Ed Schulman. One of our service dogs are named after General Mattis. So I think, since I love dogs, I think that's a high compliment.
Indeed, it is. That shows I've finally arrived. I got a dog named after me.
I'm glad you were talking about alliances, because you have been quoted saying that's really the backbone for global security. And an area where alliances played such a critical role is Afghanistan. And the president has a tough decision. A few weeks ago, we had Ann Patterson and Ryan Crocker together, and they had very different viewpoints on what we should do in Afghanistan, with Ambassador Crocker hoping we would keep a presence and Ambassador Patterson not quite as forceful on that. Where do you stand?
Well, I think first, we have to remember why we're there. I mean, do those of us with my color hair remember the day after 9/11 when Dallas-Fort Worth Airport was shut down? Not one airplane was taking off and going in the sky, not one. So we have to remember why we are there. And the fastest way to end a war is to lose it. Just walk out and lose it. I think what we have to look at here is what can the allies do? And remember that when we got attacked, it grew to 49 allied nations alongside us, the largest wartime coalition in modern history. So it wasn't just us. They rallied to us because we led the way in. Now we have to look at, how do we come out of there without worsening the situation? What are our interests? For example, There are more than 70 nations willing to contribute funds for schools, public health, roads, and that sort of thing in Afghanistan. There are 30-some nations that have troops there. And right now, even though it was America that was attacked, that started that war there, that we were attacked by people who had planned and organized and orchestrated that attack and killed over 3,000 people on our soil, innocent citizens from 91 countries. And now we have these allies still there today, and there are 3 times as many allied troops on the ground as there are American, which shows they're willing to stick with us. You want to give up on allies like that as a last resort. So I think what we do, we make it very clear to the Taliban, the same thing we've made clear for over 15 years to them, 20 years. If you break with Al-Qaeda, the people who attacked us, as long as you don't go murdering people, girls for going to school and that sort of thing, we'll let you settle it Afghan to Afghan. But we are not going to pull out and find our country attacked again and thousands more killed from there. And it's a very tough job for the president to figure this out. But again, how do you deal with it? 3 words: allies, allies, allies. You keep together with like-minded nations. Back over to you, Jim.
What level troops would you recommend? Is that an unfair question to ask you?
Well, you need to look at what needs to be done. Let's put it in context. Someone I think was saying there's 2,500 there. I'm just repeating now what I read in the news. 2,500 U.S. troops. In New York City, there's over 40,000 metropolitan and transit police. I'll just leave it there.
Okay. Let's talk about China. In this document, the National Defense Strategy in 2018, you described China as a strategic competitor. More recently, I watched a speech that you gave at the Jackson Institute at Yale University, and you said that the United States and China are on a collision course. What do we do about China?
Yeah, you know, Ambassador Frank Wisner was talking about this recently, and he's one of our best diplomats. He's been around. There's nothing new under the sun. He's a constantly learning person. And he said, we're going to have to compete with China. We're okay with competing with China. I think we better start working more together as a team here in America if we're going to. But we can compete with anyone. We're free people, free men and women. We're going to have to cooperate with them where we can, maybe on climate change, maybe on pandemics, maybe on North Korea missiles, you know, that sort of thing. We're going to have to confront them where we must. For example, when they decide to ignore an international tribunal that says their 9-dash line giving them full possession of the South China Sea is a fiction. That's an international tribunal. That's not Americans saying that. That's an international tribunal that they signed up to go along with, and they are now ignoring. And when you look at what China's doing in COVID, the concealment and the theft of intellectual property, the denial, even spreading lies. When you look at the cyber and economic attacks on Australia, what they're doing to the Uyghurs, I can go on, Hong Kong, I can go on. I think what we have to do is we have to open, like the Reagan and Secretary George Shultz team did back in the Reagan administration with Russia. We need to open a strategic dialogue, because we are going to have to find how do we manage our differences when 2 nuclear armed superpowers step on each other's toes, as we certainly will at times. We're going to have to learn how to do this. And I was talking to my counterpart one night in the woods of Virginia at Mount Vernon, and I asked him, you know, do you understand how the hardworking Chinese people have benefited from the international system that was set up after World War II? And he stopped and looked at me and said, yes, and we know we owe America most for it. So I know we can have these kind of talks. I said, well, then we better figure out how we're going to manage our differences so we don't do what Europe did twice in the 20th century and set the world on fire. So he was upset, but that we're going to have a sustained, strategic, philosophical dialogue with the Chinese leaders. Sustained means every 3 months we go to Beijing, 3 months later they come to Washington, and we keep going with the same people, working out what can we work together on, where can we cooperate, Where are we not going to agree to talk, to work on together? You know, we're going to have to get this going because we're living on the same planet with them.
So I don't have a name for this question, but it's coming from 667. And he or she asks, are we spending too much money on arms and not enough on updating our AI in technology? And the same questioner asks, and I think it sort of follows, what about this gray zone, this hacking, solar winds, for example, recently from Russia? Are we devoting enough resources to protecting our country from this type of aggression?
You know, when I was answering a previous question, I noted that, yeah, our current weapons, our ships, our airplanes, they're probably about as ready as they need to be a deterrent to anybody who wants to cause mischief. But what we didn't do during those years was, remember, we weren't looking toward future readiness, and AI is front and center on this. So we are now playing catch up as we try to catch up on the time lost. And those programs are underway. When I got there, I recognized, whether it be AI or hypersonics and some other high-tech things, I needed someone who really knew this stuff. So I brought in the former director of NASA, and he came in, and for 3 years, he was running these programs, 3.5 years, as he was trying to get the research and development funds to do exactly what your questioner is asking here. But as far as the gray zone goes, I think the way to look at it is, right now in Dallas, we're not worried about the Chinese Air Force bombing the city. And we're not concerned with the Russian Navy sailing up the Rio Grande River. But we're very concerned right now with cyber attacks and all. And I think we need an early warning system. I think the government needs to do it. There is not enough trust in the country right now to force this, but I think we need to have NSA and Cybercom put in some kind of protected domain that small business owners, families, anybody could, if they wanted to, come inside it, and it would be more heavily protected. But we couldn't force it right now. There's people who think the government will be stealing the information and all of it. So, you know, it's going to have to be volunteer. But I think too, you cannot simply play defense. And we are going to have to look, when we catch somebody, first of all, name and shame them. Tell the world what they're doing, who's doing it. And then number two, you hold them accountable. How do you do it? 3 words: allies, allies, allies. Get a lot of people to use economic penalties, to use diplomatic isolation, all sorts of things that people say, I'm not going to let that happen from my country. We're just not going to do it. The cost is unbearable.
President Biden and his top lieutenants have all endorsed really the phrase, America is back. Are they taking all the right steps? And are there some that perhaps they have not taken that you might recommend?
Well, they have to play the ball where it lies, I think, Jim. And they are doing the right thing, where you see their Secretary of Defense, General Austin, has gone to Brussels and said, we're with you. Article 5 is absolute. An attack on one is an attack on all. Just like when New York City was attacked on 9/11, they all took it as an attack on them, and they stood by us. It shows the value of fighting with allies. It is hard fighting with allies, but you can see it's absolutely working. It was very interesting, Jim, going to your China question, that the first summit that President Biden took part in, this is where the heads of state talk, it was Japan, Australia, and India, what we call the Quad, with the United States. And you can tell that this is very worrisome to an authoritarian government in Beijing, because they immediately began talking about how the Quad is a failure. Well, since we had just started the talk at that level, nothing is more indicative of the concern they have of those 4 democracies getting together. And so, is he on the right track? I believe he is. I personally got over enjoying public humiliation by 2nd grade, and it's back to working with our allies, or as Condoleezza Rice used to put it to us when we were brand new brigadier generals, she would wave her finger at us, and I think it was 27 inches long, And she would say, and for you young generals, she was the national security advisor. I want you to remember, we do things with our allies, not to our allies. Yes, we're going in the right direction. We burned a lot of bridges. We scared a lot of people. We worried a lot of people. And it's going to take time to regain the trust. But yes, they're on the right path.
How do we have our allies believe that they can feel confident that we're going to follow the plain line that we're on now when we have another election in 3.5 years?
Well, remember that during the Cold War, we had Republicans and Democrat administrations, but they stuck with the strategy. The value of a strategy is it's also a way to kind of limit your appetite. It says what you stand for, it says what you won't stand for. And if it's put together with input in the Pacific from the Quad and other like-minded nations, if it's put together with input from NATO, you start building the trust. But the bottom line is trust is the coin of the realm. And if you say you're going to do something, then you have to do it. That's the bottom line. You can't say you're going to bomb Assad if he uses chemical weapons and then not do it and not have people all around the world recalibrate. You can't tell NATO that, well, maybe we're with you, maybe we're not on Article 5, that an attack on one is an attack on all. And that's going to resonate around the world. You've got to give your word for things. You've got to know where you stand. More importantly, you have to know what you will not stand for. And then you bring in 3 people, allies, allies, and allies.
We got 30 seconds for me to ask you, sir, how do you feel about the Abraham Accords?
The Abraham Accords are lens changing, nearly revolutionary. Let me give you a number. I always like quantifying issues, at least at the beginning. After the Abraham Accords were signed, where the United Arab Emirates recognized Israel and said they had a right to exist, and that was totally due. A lot of people want credit for it. It was totally due to the political courage and the strategic vision of the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates. That's who did it. And he's been trying to do it for a long time. He did it. And during Hanukkah, the Jewish holiday at the tail end of last year, there were over 100,000 Israeli tourists in the United Arab Emirates. 100,000 Israeli tourists can't all be wrong. They can't all be stupid. This is lens changing. This is heartening. And to go back to the earlier question about how much money we spend on defense, now if we work with those allies, Arab and Israeli, we can probably reduce our military commitment to the Middle East without creating the conditions for Iran to start feeling brave again and go off and start killing more people.
Well, it's not always easy to end a program when we talk about the Middle East on an optimistic note. General Jim Mattis, you've done it. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for really being here to honor Maria and all the support that you have provided to our World Affairs Council and others around the country. And with that, I'd like to introduce Peter Wobby. Peter Wobby has been a director of the World Affairs Council for a number of years, and his law firm, Greenberg Traurig, is one of the presenting sponsors along with Pepsico. And we're so grateful to Greenberg for all of their support. And so, Peter, I turn it over to you to conclude tonight's program. Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed this great conversation. General Mattis, Jim, thank you both for being with us tonight as we celebrate Maria, our International Educator of the Year. I'm confident your remarks inspired the future leaders who are with us today. Greenberg Traurig is proud to be a sponsor of this award. We believe it's essential to teach the next generation of the importance of global connectivity, and what better way than through the Council's Global Young Leaders Program. I'd like to recognize again our co-presenting sponsor, Pepsico, and also recognize the many individuals and companies that supported this event. Because of your investment, thousands of educators and students are able to take advantage of the Council's speaker events and engage and learn from numerous leaders. This important work is made possible with your support. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening.